Greetings, everyone. This is Graham Warren. I'm here today to welcome Annabella Kadavanich to speak on generative AI and how it's transforming data analytics into a critical partner for applied AI. Annabella is a recognized expert in data-driven technologies. She has a diverse career spanning AI, cloud infrastructure, and industrial success. So during her academic career, she trained neural networks to generate artificial genomes, laying the foundation for an unwavering commitment to data quality. Her industrial career at Siemens, a global company with over 320,000 employees worldwide, has entailed several database migrations, the construction of sophisticated cloud apps, and now she's guiding complex industrial AI projects where data is the key to success. Annabella, really appreciate you being here today, sharing your wisdom. And I know we have a lot of folks who are very keen to hear your insights as a hiring manager. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. And I will try to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second. It seems like Zoom, unfortunately, does not have access. My apologies for that.
Let me just see if I need to give you access. If I make you co-host, that could fix it.
All right. It says I have to quit and then rejoin, but then I should be able to share my screen. Just give me 1 moment, please.
Sure.
Try this again. So we actually joke when we interview people remotely, where I'll say this is the first challenge, getting all your permissions set up and then your screen when we do like technical interviews. So it's interesting to be on the other side this time. Right. Let me try to share my screen again. Okay. Can you guys see my present?
Yes. We can, yes.
Perfect. Alrighty. Just moved on. Awesome. Okay, cool. So again, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk to all of you today. My name is Annabella, and I work for Siemens Corporation. And today, in the next 30 to 40 minutes, I wanted to share with you a few examples of applied AI in industry, and basically the trends, and also some examples of like what we guys are actually doing from a day-to-day basis, like in our jobs in regards to AI. So before we jump into some examples, I just briefly also wanted to introduce myself to you guys. So my background is in computer science. I'm actually from Germany. I was born in Germany. That's also where I got my degree. So I studied computer science and I specialized in artificial intelligence and then in natural language processing. So like training language models was what I did throughout my whole college career, and then also after college when I had my first academic job. So when I got out of college, I worked as a machine learning engineer. We trained neural networks that are more specifically generative adversarial networks, so that are neural networks that generate data. That was a really cool project where we actually generated artificial genomes, so like artificial DNA, that was then being used for research in Europe. And that was really cool. Like, I think that's the first time I could see the impact, that data is making. And so that was like the beginning of my career, but it already like kind of spiked that fire in me that I studied the right field and that I want to continue working in that area. And so that was my little, I think, 1-year career in academia. And then after that, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, I got a full-time job in industry. So I started working as a full stack cloud developer, mainly in backend. So we're building like cloud apps. And then I was promoted into the role of head of cloud. That's also what brought me here to the US. So my company relocated me from Germany to the US. So I'm now based in Orlando, Florida, and I've been here since 2 years and enjoyed the great weather down here. And as head of cloud, of course, I was responsible for building our cloud portfolio. So that means I had to hire people, I had to build a team. We, and that team, basically, you can imagine our daily business was really that different customers from different domains. Like we had a lot of healthcare customers, but we also had sales and marketing, like really all kinds of industries. They called us and they were like, hey, we have some kind of a manual process or something that we want to take into the cloud to be more efficient. And so my team and I were then doing the full end-to-end process from gathering all the requirements, implementing the tool, delivering the tool, and then also doing the hypercare, so like supporting the customer even after the delivery. And a lot of those projects were like data migrations. So sometimes clients had databases that just didn't scale anymore enough, right? Sometimes the use case just changed, so they needed a new database, or sometimes they had like databases that would run on-prem and they wanted to just take it into the cloud. So yeah, I had a lot of touch points with data, and again, like throughout my whole career, I always saw the importance of data in all of our projects. And then lastly, so last year I changed my roles again. I think the cool thing is if you work in a big company, you don't have to leave your company, you can just move around within your company. And so I moved in a role that's called customer success. So it means, again, you talk to your customers and make sure that they find and get the right digital solution. The difference in this role to the previous one is that in my previous role, I would only build cloud apps. In this role now, my job is really to talk to all of our clients and understand their needs and their challenges, and then recommend the right digital tool or solution for them, and then also identify the right team so we can build that tool for them. So that can be RPA, like a robot automation. It can be a low-code app like Mendix or Pega. It can be a full stack app. It can be a hybrid. So the whole tech landscape is just much bigger. But all of those tools, we always rely on our data. So that's definitely the common ground that all of those jobs share. And over the last 2 years, all of our clients are just asking for AI tools. Like wherever I go, every time at some point they ask me, can we build AI on top of this? Can we do AI? Can we, like, it's just everywhere. So basically I'm really doing a lot of AI engagement right now. Okay. Just a few
Annabella,
examples.
you threw some names out there. I guess you're going to get into the tools now, the AI tools, right?
Yeah, I'll give
You
some
threw-
examples.
Okay.
But if anything is unclear, if you want me to explain anything, please chime in and just ask. We can definitely have a dialogue, or you can ask after the session as well.
Thanks.
Okay, awesome. All right, so just maybe 2 examples. I will show you 2 typical projects that we worked on before this whole AI thing really boomed and got like a big thing. And then we'll look at 4 examples of really AI-based solutions that are high in demand. So in the past, like, I would say like 5 years ago or so, a lot of times clients, they call us and they said, they have so much data, like in big companies, right? They grow a lot of data, and at some point it can be challenging to manage that data. And I remember a lot of times they wanted us to help them to like bundle all that data. They wanted to combine all their data into one, like I call it a merged database, but really just one centralized database, so they could then create some kind of reporting on top of that in Tableau or Click or Power BI or whatever tool the customer wants to use. And the biggest chunk of that work is normally this first part here of like, how do I aggregate all of that data, right? And I'm sure a lot of you might, like you can probably code in Python or some kind of coding language, and for you that's probably like easy peasy. But the challenge in industry is always that you want to build a tool that of course works, and is of high quality, but it also needs to be something that your client can maintain, right? And that's also compliant within your client's system and IT infrastructure. And what we've seen works really well is Alteryx. So Alteryx is a tool that is being used a lot. Like I know so many people using Alteryx. I also used Alteryx and built some workflows in the past. So for those of you that don't know the tool, there's like a screenshot here. And it's basically really just like a visual tool where you can drag and drop those little icons that you see here. Like the purple one in the middle is a join. There's like little logical chunks basically that do certain SQL logic, right? But in a visual way, and you really just drag and drop it, and you can make some selections. So it's very user friendly even for people that are maybe not, you know, experts in that field, but it gives them enough autonomy that they can, you know, they can get an expert who can design all those data flows for them, and then they can kind of maintain it themselves, or like they might just have an expert to check in every month and make sure everything works. But it gives them like a certain level of autonomy, and that's a lot of times what they want. So here in Alteryx, you can see you can plug in data sources from Salesforce, from Excel. I think this is Abby. And then the data can flow into another database, an Excel spreadsheet, or you can trigger certain workflows. So this is a really visual process, and we've seen our clients really like stuff like that. You can merge the data, and then the customer themselves, or like a data analyst or an expert, can create reports or do like advanced analytics on top of that. So that's one example. No AI yet, right? But that's what we've seen a lot in the past. Another example, more in the cloud space, that a lot of people that called me for a cloud app, they always want us to migrate their databases into the cloud. What you see here is just an example of AWS. So within AWS, you have, for example, DynamoDB as a managed database. Dynamo is incredibly cheap. Like when I see the monthly breakdown for what those transactions cost, like it's really, really affordable. And that's why a lot of people that had, you know, databases running on-prem, they were like, it was just so expensive to maintain that whole infrastructure. So they wanted to take that database into the cloud and then use that, you know, data to feed into some kind of application logic. And so a lot of times what we had to do and what our data experts had to do is customers like to provide data as a spreadsheet. And spreadsheets are definitely prone to errors. So I would highly recommend, you know, for those of you who maybe already have a job or might get like into like a corporate job after college, please don't just upload Excel sheets into the cloud. Like we definitely learned it's really important to look at that data, even if your client tells you, oh, you can trust that data, don't trust the data. Look at the data. Most of the time we had to cleanse the data. We have to like run an ETL job in between, like in the cloud, before we upload that data. Like if it's, for example, uploaded on a quarterly basis, you definitely want to make sure that every quarter you maintain that data quality. So there has to be some kind of validation mechanism in between. If you are familiar with continuous integration and continuous development, like if you have basically pipeline for your development cycle, you want to integrate that into those pipelines, like you want to automate this process. So that are just some best practices that we've seen when we migrate tools into the cloud. And so all of that, you know, were a lot of things that are important, that were important in the past, but are also really important today. But then we had this big wave of let's do Gen AI, so generative AI. And so what I want to show you next is 4 examples of like some AI tools that I've seen are like really in high demand. Like so many people and so many customers have asked me and also my friends that work for different companies in different roles for similar tools. So just to give you some idea of what we're actually doing in our corporate jobs all day. And before we jump into those examples, just to explain to you maybe also a bit like the intuition about how to, what is important to consider when you develop AI tools. We had like this phenomena like where when this whole AI thing started, right? Like 2 years ago, I think when, you know, ChatGPT became publicly available and basically anybody on their laptop could just go open ChatGPT and start exploring AI, right? Like making AI really accessible for anybody out there. there was a high interest, right, into developing AI tools. Like you could literally even generate code using ChatGPT. So what we saw was we suddenly had, I like to call it all those mushrooms, like those AI tools just popping up everywhere, right? So we had like 20 chatbots, 50 AI apps, 30 AI dashboards. And then after a year, so like all of those people, like from different teams, they came together and they were like, hey, I developed this really cool tool. And we all sat down together and we realized, oh my God, we have 20 chatbots that basically do the same, right? One developed in the US, one developed out in India, one in Europe. So it's like, we just kind of realized, okay, we all learned a lot, right? But basically we invested the same efforts for the same tool. And what that means for a company is efforts are duplicated and you're basically losing money, right? So we said, okay, this was interesting. We have to find a more structured approach. And because I work in a role where I basically help making that recommendation for like, which tool do we build? How do we build AI tools? Of course, I also sat down with my leadership team and we were like, okay, what can we do to have a more structured approach, not only for us as a company, but also for our clients, right? To develop high quality tools in a fast and efficient way. And so we definitely said, okay, we don't want to reinvent the wheel every day again and again, right? We also had customers that called us and told us that even within their company, they had so many duplicate tools that they wanted to eliminate. So we came up with an approach that has worked really well for us. And so basically, what I do on a daily basis is that whenever a customer calls me, and again, 90% of my customers want to do some kind of AI. I'm not saying all of those people will get an AI tool because, of course, we have to look at the IT landscape and see if they are ready to do AI. And a lot of times we cannot do that just in the way of how their database systems are set up, or maybe we have to do extensive data cleansing first. So we kind of iterate in a few phases of setting customers up for success, making sure the IT systems are ready to use AI tools, and then down the road, of course, we want to help our clients to get the tools that they want. But so basically, again, in those initial conversations, client calls me, they're like, this is my challenge, this is my vision, this is where I want to go. There are basically three things that come to my mind, like three options. And I called it here in the slide, custom solution, a product, or a service. So what does that mean? If you want to think about it like if you get out of college, you get your first paycheck and you decide, okay, now I want to buy a house, right? And so you buy that awesome house and then you're like, okay, I have to replace my door. And now you have different options, right? So you could just go to Home Depot and I'm sure there's a lot of doors in there and you could just choose one. So one of their products, you could take it back home, like hang in the door and you're done, right? So this is really a product. And when we think about AI tools, this would be a AI product, right? So a solution that's AI-based and just ready to go, already fully developed, maintained by like a certain team, AI product. What happens now, let's say you buy that door, you take it home, it doesn't fit. And maybe you have some kind of house is not the standard architecture, right? So you have to take back that door and then you have to call somebody and probably be like, hey, I need like a custom door, and they have to go and chop the wood and paint it, and they will build that custom door that only fits into your house. And when we think about AI tools, that would be a custom AI solution. So that's really when customers have very specific requirements that are very specific to their process. Similar to like a custom door, a custom AI tool is much more work. And so that's definitely something where we really want to think about if we want to develop a custom tool. Sometimes for compliance or data privacy reasons, of course, we have to do it, right? Like some teams and the way they are set up, they cannot use generic AI products. But those are basically two things that I always like keep in the back of my mind, that when I go out there and I talk to clients, it's really important to understand, do they want a product like a AI tool, like some kind of software that already exists, or do we have to build something custom? And then there's also a third option. So what if you go to Home Depot, your door doesn't fit? Then you call some kind of like some person, like a contractor, somebody asks them to do like a custom door and they're like for some reason they cannot do it, right? But you still need a door. So what you can do now is the last thing, the service part. So you can consult with somebody who's like an expert, and you could ask them, what can I do? Like, how do I get my door? And when we think about AI, that's more like the consulting part, right? So for me, a service is really AI consulting. So what that means in business is that sometimes, customers, they call you and they know they have to change something, but they don't know what they need to change. So basically, then what we do is an exchange of money for time. So basically, I can buy resources or like a consultant. So I would, dedicate time to that customer. And we would talk about, again, their IT landscape, like understanding what is your current IT setup? What kind of data do you have? What is documented? Like I'm looking at that, and I'm just providing some guidance. So that are the big three domains basically that we see when we talk about AI tools in a business. Okay, so let's maybe look into some examples now, right? So I brought 4 examples for you of applied AI tools that I've seen are being used a lot. Like those tools are really like things that almost on a weekly basis people ask for and want to do throughout different industries and domains. And I will start with the first one, which is, I call it ChatGPT platforms. And what I mean by that is that like 2 years ago when ChatGPT became publicly available, one big challenge for companies is that a lot of people, they wanted to be more productive at their job. But the issue is if you use the open available ChatGPT version to do your job, you might be sharing sensitive data with OpenAI and that's can have legal consequences, not only for you, but also for your employer. So that's definitely something where you want to really make sure that you understand your company's regulations. But at the same time, of course, as big companies, we recognize like that using generative AI and like ChatGPT can really make our daily life easier. It can increase, I think, productivity up to 80%. So of course, we want to empower employees to use those tools, right? And I think for big companies like Siemens, it's pretty easy. We have a dedicated team and experts that could set up like a private instance of ChatGPT that's really just exclusively for our company. And we had like a whole marketing team that could communicate all those changes to the employees, educate them. Everybody knew, hey, if you want to use ChatGPT, please like use the internal version. But a big challenge was like a lot of startups or like medium-sized companies could not just do that. So they were basically either at risk if they used the public version, or they could just not use those benefits that platforms like that offer. And so I thought it was really interesting. I think 2 months ago, I talked to a friend in Germany, and he's like, he's been an entrepreneur since he was 16. And I think now he has like 20 employees and he runs like his own business. And so he showed me that they actually built their own ChatGPT platform in a way that they can roll it out in instances to different companies, like medium-sized companies. I think that's their target audience, or startups. So it's like your own private ChatGPT instance that they will roll out for you. It really just runs in a Docker container, so you can roll it out into any cloud platform. And interesting thing is this tool is GDPR compliant. GDPR is the data privacy regulations applicable in the European Union, so in Europe. Europe is really, really strict about things like that, much stricter than the US. So it's almost impossible to roll out tools like that if you're not GDPR compliant. And so basically they built that platform that allows you in a safe and secure way to use ChatGPT. And at the same time, they also have like, I think 3 modules that are like more educational. So when you choose their platform, they have like 6 free training sessions that also educate employees about how to prompt properly and how to get the maximum benefits from that tool. Yeah, so really interesting. That's definitely one example of what a lot of companies are looking for these days. Then another example is something that I called document whisperer, but it's really more like a document agent. So the challenge here is that a lot of clients, they have to deal with a lot of documents. And I'm not talking just about 10-page documents. Like we're talking here about documents with 1,000 pages, maybe really complex manufacturing documents, product specification documents, like really long and difficult, complex documents. And in the past, you know, when clients wanted to find an efficient way to extract data from those documents, we used OCR, optical character recognition. So that's a more pattern-based approach that you basically define some rules and you're like, hey, whenever you see, just an example, like the word PO or like purchase order, extract the number after that word and write it to SAP. So like you could define some kind of workflows. But the challenge was really that, you know, if you didn't have any patterns, it didn't work that well, right? And a lot of customers, they get all kinds of different documents, or documents change throughout the year. And then OCR just didn't work that great. So when generative AI started and we had those large language models, the big value add was really that now suddenly clients could, you know, send or could use hundreds of documents that all look totally differently. And we could still use that to just upload it, put some kind of language model in between. And then in customer business, you also have to think about, you have to build something that's like customer friendly, right? Because our customers normally are not technical. So we normally always build some kind of chatbot interfaces that the client can use to interact with their tools. Yeah. So imagine you have a little chat box, you can upload your documents, and then you can simply just chat with your documents, right, to get that data.
Annabella,
so yes.
On this document whisperer, is that primarily just text that they're trying to interrogate, or would that be tabular data as well?
That's a good question. It's a lot of times it starts with text, but a lot of customers are also interested in more like a object recognition approach, right? So like in those manufacturing documents, right, they want to understand, like when we have those prints of like how they manufacture certain things, they also want to extract that information. But that's definitely also something that we're looking into. That's a bit more complex, but definitely also in demand.
Thanks.
Absolutely, yeah. All right. And so yeah, like, but this whole document space of like, how can I process my data? That's really something where a lot of people are struggling with that, and a lot of people really are so happy when we like give them very simple tools actually, that they can just upload their documents and then get the data they need to get. And of course, like a lot of times we just automate that, right? It's not like you would always just go and chat with your document, because then again, you need a human that sits there all day and then extracts that data. So when we build like workflow tools that do like end-to-end processes, there would be some kind of automation here where you process the document, you extract data, you write data to SAP or Snowflake or some kind of ERP system, and it just triggers a workflow. Okay. Then another example are knowledge agents, maybe a bit similar, but in the end, it really just means a company has a lot of data in different places. So maybe you have some kind of data in Excel and PDF. You might have a dedicated database. This is the Confluence logo. If you don't know Confluence, it's a tool where teams can organize themselves and create pages and wikis. Tech teams use it a lot of times for like technical documentation, architecture diagrams, like stuff like that. And so a lot of times what we saw more in the HR space is that they always ask for those onboarding tools, right? So they want some kind of onboarding agent or like a knowledge agent that gathers all that data, right? And then a new employee, when they get onboarded, they can basically just talk to the agent and they can ask, you know, where can I find my PTO policy? So maybe one of those PDF documents is a policy, right? Or how can I request sick leave? So maybe that was documented in Confluence. Or how can I request Snowflake access, right? So this is a big value add, just because new employees, like if you were new in a company, imagine you don't want to like bother your boss or your coworkers all the time, right? Because you're new and you might, you know, just feel like you don't want to bother them too much. So tools like that make knowledge access, and again, just access to data in the end, very smooth for employees. So it's really simple tools like that that make a big impact in companies. And then the last topic is the one that I'm personally most excited about. I call it Ask DB, so ask your database. And that's really in the space of data analytics and reporting. So last month, Google hosted their annual cloud conference, Google Next in Las Vegas. And I was attending one of those keynotes, and they actually, so of course they talked a lot about Gemini, right? And in one of those keynotes, they showed that they built a tool that they call the data agent, and that really allows you to chat with all your data in BigQuery and in GCP in Google Cloud. And you can see here that the presenter, she just like wrote a simple prompt. So she said, explore cloud shoe sales over customer segments and territories in a heat map. And then using Gemini, so Gemini is multimodal, right? It generated a heat map, and it would basically visualize the data. So that was super interesting, because if we think about that, this is really maybe the future of reporting, right? So instead of having one report that you maybe show to your manager every month, or like one KPI report, you could now really just go into a more interactive process of engaging with your data. And like we really see that a lot of customers, that's what they want to do, because they always tell us like, you know, I have one database, but then when I go to my management, I need to create a custom management report. When I look at my own KPIs and my team, I need my own KPI team report. Then when I go somewhere else, I need another report, right? So it's just really tedious to generate all of those different reports. And so, of course, if you could just talk to your data and get your own individual on-demand report, I think that's something where we've seen a lot of interest. So again, it's really just maybe transforming the way of how we do reporting. And of course, we need smart people and smart data analysts to design all of that in the background, right? Because in the end, we're not really changing what we are doing, we're changing how we're doing it, right? So instead of looking at a dashboard, we might just talk and engage with our data, and then want to see more like individualized results. And, you know, reporting is a big topic. Like I've seen no company that works well and has no reports. So that's definitely a topic that is of interest for many, many companies out there.
Annabella, could we take just a moment to see if there are any questions in the room here?
Absolutely.
Any questions or thoughts here, folks? Yeah. Let me just walk over here.
So because you're talking about like there are a lot of AI reporting tools for now, like for this as data based data agent, you can just generate report by just input your data inside. So I'm just kind of worried, like, do we really need to learn some reporting tools like Tableau or Power BI, since all the AI tools can just generate it?
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good question. And I would say yes, because like what I'm showing you here, and we'll also talk about that towards the end of this presentation, is we're seeing trends right now, right? But we don't know if this can really be built in a scalable way that's accessible for all kinds of companies, right? And I believe the reality is, in the same way how a lot of companies until today are using manual Excel processes, which is really highly inefficient most of the time, it takes time to transform into some like a new process and a new way of doing things, right? So even if this was the future, I believe it's the future down the road, like 5 to 10 years. And if you go into a job interview and you know Tableau, Power BI, and if you can build dashboards, I would say that's a necessary requirement at this point in time, and even the years to come. And so also like maybe to add, if you don't know how those tools work, you can also not help companies maybe rethink that process, because this might look cool, but it doesn't mean that this is really what a company needs, right? So I think it's still really important to have both of the knowledge of both worlds, and then you could be the person in between that can bridge that knowledge. I think that's how you provide a lot of value to your company.
So Annabella, just a follow-up question on this. You sit in a sort of a control position in some of these client conversations where, you know, you can see where they are You can see where, Google is with their Google Next. And I'm assuming that you're trying to pitch them down the road a little bit. But there's a lot from your perspective, there's a lot of control. So what are your thoughts on there? I mean, how do you sort of pick a sweet spot here where you're not kicking the can too far down the road, but you definitely are moving them forward, right? What are your thoughts about how that looks at this point, just from your personal perspective in guiding clients?
So I will show later in that slides that I think a lot of the things that we see now are trends. And I personally also can see that sometimes it seems like to me that AI is being used as a buzzword, to get the interest of a customer or to sell something and make it sound fancy. But I really believe in in a responsible use of AI and really building high quality tools that can include AI products, but they don't have to, right? I think there's nothing wrong at all with a nice Tableau dashboard. And so what I want to show here today is more trends and things that are happening, but I definitely want to encourage everybody to understand that we're seeing a lot of trends now. And maybe as we move on through the presentation, this will become a bit more clear what I mean. But I definitely would encourage you to always, stay curious, but also stay cautious.
So you mentioned this, that chat, when you talked about the chatbots, you talked about these chatbots being developed within Siemens in various locations. I mean, I'm assuming that there's a bunch of clients out there that have plants in different parts of the world, let's say, or offices, and their use cases are largely similar, but there's probably some local flavor, local context.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm assuming that you're mindful of that, and you certainly are trying to build the sort of broad apps that sort of encompass all of those. So that's the scaling piece, right?
Exactly. So we can see that, for example, my team, I work in a global team with, people here in the US, people in South America, people in Europe and India, and we basically split up our roles into territories. So I'm responsible for the Americas, which includes, the US, Canada, Central America, and South America. But then I also have counterparts, like people that have the same role that are responsible for Europe or like for Asia, right? And those people are then responsible for making sure that, like you said, those tools or those chatbots that we build, that they are compliant with the local regulations, and that they also, of course, match the market and the preferences of our customers here. So absolutely, yes.
Cool.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. But yeah, so what that also means to you guys, like roles like this, of course, you will have a lot of interaction with people from all over the world, and probably also opportunity to travel to other places if you work for a bigger company or maybe even for smaller companies. So if that's something that you enjoy, like those roles where you're like kind of in between, right? Like in between tech and business, I think there's so much room to grow and to explore the world. So if you enjoy that, I would definitely can recommend those jobs. Okay. And if you have more questions, are there any more questions, or should we proceed?
Let's go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. Okay, cool. So we saw 4 examples now. And so my takeaway message for you guys would really be, while you see all those tools, always keep in mind that we build tools in the backend using microservices, right? Because as I just explained, in different parts of the world, they might all need a chatbot, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel again and again. But we also need the flexibility to adjust to local requirements in regards to data privacy, compliance, or even just the market, right? Like I can definitely tell you the US market is very different than the market in Germany. Like when I moved here, I saw a lot of differences, and so we definitely have to address that when we build tools for our clients here. And so if you go into a corporate job or like in any job and you can build those tools, you might want to think about how you want to build it from an architecture perspective, and microservices really give you a lot of flexibility to scale it and to make those services accessible even for other teams that are outside of your country, or they can just deploy it in their own instances. So that's been an approach that I found to be really, really helpful.
Annabella,
Or-
on this microservices piece, is this sort
Mhm.
of like more of your supervised learning kind of app versus Gen AI? Is that what you mean by that?
What I mean by microservice is like microservice as an architecture pattern, so that you have dedicated development teams that maintain different logical services, right? So maybe one team develops a AI-based translation service, and how we, like for us, that means in our teams, so we have an advanced analytics team, right? So that team would handle the data part. But then we might also have a cloud team that develops some kind of front end for our customers. So it's basically those teams working together and taking ownership for one service, and they get a dedicated product owner, like somebody who will bridge development and business. And then they make those services accessible to our customers or like internally to other teams. So they work really closely with all kinds of stakeholders. And they would also make those decisions about, do I use like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, like large language models? So that's, yeah, exactly their responsibility to choose that architecture and the technologies.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. Awesome. Okay. And then lastly, I don't know, you guys feel, I always feel there's this unspoken obligation that when you talk about AI, you always have to talk about responsible AI and compliance. But I already heard that you guys already learned a lot about how to use AI in a responsible way. So I really just have one slide. So really just a little reminder that whenever we go into our jobs every day, as exciting as it might sound, to just start running and building those tools. And of course, when you work like me in a customer-facing role, clients always want the tools right away. They need them right away. They needed them like yesterday, right? So there's a lot of pressure. But I think it's very important to just keep in mind that you always want to get into those conversations with your compliance officer or your data privacy officer and ensure that what you're doing is done in a way how it should be done. And so instead of responsible AI, since you guys already learned about that, I wanted to spend a little bit of time also, now that we've seen all those trends and the hype, to talk about some other important topics. And one thing is AI washing. So AI washing is a term that I learned about like a few months ago, and I was like, oh, like what's that? And I thought it was really interesting, so I wanted to share that with you as well. And to explain that term, for those of you that might not know what AI washing is, I wanted to show you 2 examples. So we see here, like there's 2 pictures. On the left side, we have the mechanical Turk that was developed in the 1770s, so a long, long time ago, by I think Wolfgang from Kepler. And then on the right side, we have a picture of a woman who's using, who's checking into a supermarket that's using the Amazon Just Walk Out technology in 2016. And like I want to take some time to explain both pictures and then also kind of show you a little bit what they might have in common. So in the 1770s, long, long time ago, Kepler built this mechanical Turk. So it's basically a robot that can play chess. And he was claiming that it's a fully automated robot, right? So he kind of said it's an autonomous robot that can play chess and that can beat even the chess champions. And a lot of people were really excited about that. I mean, in the 1770s, you know, they call it automation. I think today you just call it AI or like an AI-based robot. But so they were getting a lot of public attention, and I think they were touring all around the country, and the robot would beat everybody in chess. Like it was crazy. And so they got more and more attention. But then one day they actually found out that it was all just a fraud, right? So this robot was not autonomous. It was really just somebody sitting down here under this little table, like a smart person, I guess, who was navigating the robot and was playing chess against other human beings. And then on the other side, you're like, you know, why did I add this picture here as well? And so to give you some background, in 2016, Amazon, they released a technology that was called Just Walk Out. So what that means is it's a technology that supermarkets or like little stores can implement. And basically you walk into a store. I think I've been to one store in New York City once, and I could try, it was really cool. So I think when you walk in, you scan like your Amazon Prime QR code. So they kind of know, okay, it's Annabella. I walk into the store, and then they said they have a state-of-the-art AI algorithm that will scan and track all the items that I take, right? So if I take a salad and like a drink, and then I would just put it like in my backpack, and then I can just walk out the store. I don't have to check out, I don't have to see a cashier, I don't have to pay. I can just walk out. And they said that their algorithm would track what I do. Like even if I take something and I put it back, it would register that. And then they would just bill me against my credit card or whatever payment data I have stored on Amazon. And so that was a big thing, right? Because that was in 2016, so long before we saw all that AI hype now in the last years. And the interesting thing was that a few weeks later, they actually discovered that while Amazon claimed that they, were using only AI, they were actually having an outsourced team in India that was, I think, doing 70% of those transactions manually, right? So it was really just 30% AI or like object detection, and then 70% of people really like sitting there watching those videos and kind of tracking how much you have to pay. And this is totally not about Amazon or anything. This is just an example. And I think big companies like Amazon, of course, it's easier for them to get into the headlines. But the intuition that I want to give you guys is really that this is AI washing, right? And we see AI washing so much like in the last weeks and years. And so what AI washing means, it's really like the same concept like greenwashing. And it kind of means that a company or like somebody is exaggerating or misrepresenting the usage or the level of usage of AI in their tools or products, right? When in reality, you might not even be using any AI. So it's like if you would buy a product and they tell you like, this is 100% AI based, and that's where you choose to buy that product because you think, oh, this is so cool. And then you go home and you see there's no AI at all. And this is an important topic. And I personally didn't even know that all of those things were happening because we've seen, this is from March 2024, that actually now government agencies like the SEC, they're now looking into topics like that. Like they're literally looking into companies or people that claim to use AI. And if they see that you're actually lying about that, they're now charging penalties, right? So this really means that there is some kind of sense of now that people are asking really for transparency after all this hype and trend, and people really want to know what they're getting. Are they getting AI? Is it maybe something else? So people really want that transparency. And you guys, I mean, you're the next generation of people that like of the workforce out there. So I think being aware of this is definitely important because you can bring a lot of value to your company by just generating that awareness, right? And making sure that you advertise AI in a way that is appropriate, and you also build tools in a way that you integrate AI in a useful way and not in a hyped way.
Annabella, question here.
Mm-hmm.
On those 4 use cases, the chatbot, the database, AI, and so forth, to what extent do your clients demand reason codes or sort of the source docs that underwrite whatever conclusion or recommendation you're making? Do folks demand that from your clients? And just sort of like, to take this possibility of AI washing out of contention, do they demand that?
I think they don't really demand. I wouldn't say demand it. Like for us, and maybe that's just because we're a German company. I think Germans just love to follow all rules, right? We always do our best to be really transparent with our customers, right? And a lot of times, like I tell my clients, look, I know you really, really, really want to do AI, but I think you don't need AI. It's totally overkill. And they don't always like that, but I think for us, it's just really important that we set realistic expectations. But a lot, like most of our clients, they're actually not technical at all. Like the teams that are technical, they just build their own tools. So as a company, it's our responsibility to build that trust, right? And to show that trust by giving our customers that transparency. So if they would ask for it, of course, we would send it to them. But I would say most of my clients, they wouldn't even understand like, what's going on. So for us, it's just really important to have that trust that our client basically knows I can trust that team and I can trust the decisions that they make based on the requirements that they provide. But it's a really good question. Like I would love to see if in the future there will be some kind of tool or process that basically you could just plug in and it will measure the level of AI, or like just break down, give you like a transparent breakdown of your application. That's a really good question. Yeah. So maybe that's
thanks.
maybe a future startup for anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur could maybe look into that. All right. And maybe then also like going towards the end of this presentation, I want to just finish this talk by talking about maybe long-term AI trends. And so there's a hype cycle by Gartner. So Gartner is a website where you can just look at their research, and they have a hype cycle where they kind of say whenever there's a hype, you have some kind of innovation, right? Like something really cool happens and people like, all over the world, like a global hype, expectations rise. And then at some point you kind of hit that peak, and then people kind of see, oh my God, we've been so delusioned, and they kind of see a bit more the reality again after all that hype. And then there's like a phase where really like the products or the trends that have value will plateau and maintain, or like and persist throughout the future, right? And Gartner actually has a hype cycle for artificial intelligence. So this is the 2023 hype cycle. And I'm sorry, it might be a bit small for you guys, but basically you can see here that we started with different AI trends, and the color of each bubble kind of indicates when Gartner thinks will reach a plateau. So the light blue ones are 2 to 5 years, the white ones less than 2 years, and then the dark ones 5 to 10 years. And the little orange triangles are more than 10 years. And so we can see how we went like here from automatic systems, multi-agent systems, AI simulation, all the way up to Gen AI here on the peak, right? So according to this cycle, they believe that we might already be at the peak, right? So Gen AI is really the peak. We might already be a bit going like down the hype. And I think that's like, looking at the slides that I showed you before, like, now people are really demanding that transparency. Like government agencies are actually investigating and, really asking companies like, hey, how much AI, like, are you really offering, right? Like what are you actually doing? So I think people are like kind of waking up from this whole trend and the hype a little bit. And so I do think it could make sense. Like I thought this graph was very interesting to see that now we might be in that phase of disillusionment, right? And it would be really interesting to see which tools persist. And I think like people like you, the future workforce, like you can really contribute to developing tools that use AI in a responsible way, by educating, your customers, by working in your tech teams and with your supervisors and your co-workers to build really those tools that will stay here in the long term, right? Because all those hype tools, they will go away, and going away means you invest the time and money in a tool that will not bring in revenue in the long term. So even from a company perspective, we want to build those tools that provide value like in the long term, right? And so and that's already like my last slide now. If you feel like, okay, I really want to get more hands-on experience, I was thinking, hey, what would I tell myself if I was back in college? Like, what would I do? And I like also maybe more from a hiring perspective, like, when we see people that have a lot of internships, I think that's a really green flag, because it shows that somebody learned those soft skills, but also technical skills of working in a company, right? They acquired an internship, they had the discipline to work on a project or company. And of course, you get hands-on experience and you get access to a network and people. So I think I did like 2 internships during college, and it was great. And I think that's something where definitely you can shine and stand out if you put that on your resume. I know that internships, of course, are a lot of work and sometimes hard to acquire. So don't feel like pressure that this is a must-have, right? What I personally would also recommend are join local developer or expert groups. I'm a part of Google Women Tech Makers. And I don't want to advertise Google or anything, but that's just programs that I can recommend because I joined them, but I know there's also like, the AWS Heroes, there's Google Developer Clubs, there's ACM, there's IEEE, or like you can check whatever association is appropriate in your domain. But the baseline is really that groups like that will connect you with experts. You will, talk to peers and people that will tell you about things that you might have never heard of, and they can write introductions for you. Sometimes this group give you like early access to some very exclusive tools. And most importantly, you can build a portfolio, right? And I know that here, even at your college, you're already participating in hackathons and you have really cool initiatives to get that hands-on experience. And so if you want to diversify that even more when you get out of college, there's a lot of groups that I'm sure they can give you some kind of impulse. And that's also like something you can definitely put on your resume, because I think it looks really good. And that's basically all I had for you today. And if you want to connect on LinkedIn, you can scan this code. You can just search for my name. And if you have any questions, down the road or later, this is my email. Feel free to email me, but I'd be happy to answer any question now in the remaining time that you might have. So thank you.
Awesome. You're getting some applause here, Annabella.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thank you.
Any questions, folks? Any questions? Yes. 1 second, let me just walk over.
Yep.
Hi, Annabella. Thank you for the presentation. I know in the beginning you mentioned that there's a lot of demand or surging across different companies or industries. Do you see this demand, like the huge increase in demand happens specifically in a certain industry or like across all of them? Are there like leading industries right now?
That's a good question. So in regards to industries, that demand for Gen AI or like AI, I've seen it among all industries. Like I never had anybody walk up to me and be like, "Oh no, I don't want to do AI. Like, thanks, I'm good." And for like, a workforce, what that means, I've seen internally just that we're hiring a lot of data analysts, right? Because we need those people that can help us scale, just because the demand is so big from our customers. So I've seen a lot of demand in that area. What I've seen is in more like that cloud space, and that's just a space that, of course, I can also speak to because I worked in that space a lot, is that with all those code generating tools now, like those co-pilots and stuff like that, I wonder how that will affect, maybe the full stack space, like for developers. But we really have a huge demand for advanced analytics, like in any customer call when they want to talk about the nitty-gritty details about potential tools that we build or like AI products that we offer, we always need somebody from advanced analytics. So we definitely need those data experts or like people like in between that understand business and data. Yep. Does that help?
She says thanks.
Awesome. Okay.
Other questions, folks? Other questions? Annabella, I want to push back on the Gartner hype cycle. I've been looking at hype cycles for years, and for the most part, I agree. But on this particular one, it seems that so many people, I understand the run up, in the chip stocks, and that exuberance. I get that, and probably don't have a lot of NVIDIA stock right now for a reason. But my sense is that a lot of folks are sort of engaging and finding deeper ways of engaging with the LLMs. The LMs, I want to say. I've stopped using the first L because there's some small LMs now, right?
Yep.
But it's sort of we're training ourselves now in different ways of using these. We're also using them to create that more sort of dynamic engagement with our clients, where we're taking the boring, the combinatorial pieces of the workflow out, assigning that to Python or the LMs. So I'm not sure that we're at the peak of that cycle. You know, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling is that it's just us showing up, and we are showing up, and we're showing up en masse.
Yep.
And maybe there's just a rising slope here. What are your thoughts
Yep.
about that view of the world?
Yeah, and I do share your views. Like when I saw that hype cycle, I kind of feel this whole AI thing is a bit different than like a normal hype, just because it's transforming the way of a lot of like in technology a lot. Like it's yeah. So I do agree. I'm not sure if we're really like already at the peak. And so we'll see in the future, but I agree with you. I still see so much demand for an interest in AI tools, and maybe what we've seen a lot recently is not only the demand for tools, it's the demand for education, right? So a lot of companies, they're really asking us like to educate them or to provide some more like consulting on like, you know, educating the employees and making sure that any employee at least has a basic understanding of generative AI, of large language models. So that like, and that kind of shows that there's still interest in that trend, right? And that it might not fall or plateau right now. But it will be interesting to see how things develop in the next few years.
In my use case, so I teach this ML class, right? And we
Mhm.
it's a hackathon-based class. And each hackathon, we have a novel data set. I mean, we're scraping stuff off of UCI and Kaggle and competitions and things like that. We slap a data dictionary on there, we slap some starter code on there, and we slap a prompt. And then folks come in here and they work on a hackathon for about 2 hours. But putting those notebooks, those starter notebooks together has been huge drama in the past, right? You know, you've got to do 4 to 6 of these each week. It just gets busy. So
Yeah.
I think you can quickly see how I can automate that, right? But
Yeah.
then, then I look at what comes back at me, and it's thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code, which in the
Yeah.
past I was grading by hand. So now Graham starts thinking, okay, maybe what I need is an autograder. So an LM-based autograder. And right here, you have me reimagining my world. You have me reimagining what questions I ask. And this
Yeah.
is, I think, the story, right, of how our worlds are going to change. We're just reimagining who we are, and
Exactly.
we're levering up. So I think it's really an exciting time, and some of the old thinking about how technology, you know, lives and dies with us. This is one that's sort of engaging us really deeply in ways that other
Exactly.
tech hasn't. So I'm really kind of excited.
I totally agree, and I think you mentioned a really good point of like that everybody should have like kind of a basic understanding, right? Because those topics, they will not just go away. And so like, you know, programs like the one that you do and those hackathons that you offer are really a great opportunity for all of you here to get that experience, right? And to be able that, even because you mentioned like hiring, right? Like when you go into that job interview, just to be able to talk with whoever's interviewing about what you've learned and maybe the hackathons you have participated in or the topics you have discussed with your professors, right? That's really great things that you can bring to the table. And I would always encourage everybody to talk about it in your interviews, right? Like show them that you have some kind of experience and don't feel like an imposter. Like, especially if you interview like for a job right out of college, like nobody will expect you to be a crazy expert or like that's really not the expectation, but it's really more about that we can see you're curious, you know, you have interests, you have the ability to learn and also to question things. I think that are really interesting soft skills that the future workforce will need. Exactly.
If you had to do over, I know that you're probably going to suggest that we need broad skills and deep skills in every possible corner of the market. But if you had to do over, what would you pick? Which corner of the market would you pick in AI and ML to meet the needs of the current market, and how would you go at it? How would you invest?
Wow, that's a very good question. I feel like I'm really happy where I'm right now. I'm very grateful, but like sometimes I'm like, I wonder like, oh my God, why did I, you know, leave academia? Because like I was, you know, working already in that like what we now call generative AI, I guess. Like I remember my thesis when I completed college was about generating artificial empathy in social robots, like humanoid robots. So basically in my thesis, I tried to develop like a model of how can a robot be empathetic on a level that you would not even see that it's a robot. Like you would think you're talking to actual human being. And then I shifted all the way into like full stack and cloud, right? And like now I'm seeing all those things happening. I'm like, oh, I wish I would have been that person at Facebook or Google that developed all those algorithms. But I'm just very impact driven. So I like working in roles that make a difference in our world. So if I would go back, I might tap on my shoulder and be like, hey, maybe stay in that NLP AI space. But then on the other hand, I'm so grateful that I'm here in the US. And I think the fact that I've seen so many things, like even now, if I would shift back into like a more academic role again or get a PhD or something, I think that's valuable skills that you can bring to the market or into like a PhD role that can again help to bridge maybe academia and business. So I'm not sure if I would actually change anything, but
That's
I do
cool.
think, yeah, it's
always-
important that,
It's
yeah,
good to be in a spot where, you know, you're happy, right?
exactly.
Do you think the tools that we're developing in 2024 are close to passing the Turing test broadly spoken?
I think some people probably already would say we passed the Turing test, right? Like depending on who you ask, but I'm not sure how close we are. I think you get $1 million, right? If you solve that problem. But it's interesting. I can't, answer that question, but I'm very impressed to see how fast things have evolved. I think that's fascinating. And if you think about if we continue at that speed, I can only imagine where it takes us in 1 or 2 years. Yeah.
Are we that close to the singularity? 1 or 2 years?
You're ambitious. You have ambitious goals.
Yeah, we're going to be
Yeah.
around, right?
Yeah.
Any other questions, folks? Last call. Yes, one more. 1 second.
Hi, Annabelle. Thank you for your sharing. So I just have a question because of the Gen AI, I believe all the daily work and workflows are all changing. So I'm just curious, like what skill set or technique we should prepare for in response to that when, trying to find a job right now.
Really good question. The biggest impact I've seen that Gen AI is making in regards to your professional environment is actually more on your own productivity, right? Of course, we're building tools for customers, but I think even Goldman Sachs or somebody did like a study to show that the quick one is really your own productivity, and I think that's something where that gives you a lot of freedom, right? Because there's so many tutorials or resources, even at college, like, or YouTube or anywhere available, how you could focus on how can I be really efficient at my job. And when you think about interviews, there's different ways that people will assess your skills, right? So you could, of course, get certifications, do some trainings on LinkedIn, show like through your university work, classwork and stuff like that, what you have achieved. But in the end, I think in an interview, people will know if you really know what you're talking about, or if you're not an expert. You have to be an expert, but people will see if you have integrity, right? And if you know what you're talking about. And I think that's, who you want to hire. Again, like people that are curious, like people that show, hey, played around with, increasing my productivity, or maybe if I don't implement your own chatbot to do some daily tasks for you or something like that. And if you can talk about that in your interview, if I was the hiring manager, I would get the impression that, you're curious, you can translate your ideas and thoughts into actions and into tools that don't have to work perfectly, but it shows that you're like that little inventor, right? And I know if I hire you, my business will always change, but I know that you're a person that can adapt to those changes. I think that's a really important quality.
Maybe one last question, folks. Last call. Annabella, really appreciate this, having
Thank
your
you.
insights here, super valuable. Thank you so much for your time. Really, thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me. It was a pleasure being here. All right. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.